Welcome to this week's lecture. We're going to be talking about, or I'm going to be talking about, starting and running and planning diverse and inclusive early childhood programs. So the class, at least our diversity understanding, is based on the anti-bias education goals, which we teach in Living in a Diverse Society class within our child development departments. And there are 4 goals that we clarify: identity, diversity, justice, and activism. Within identity, we are doing a lot of the work that we are looking for as far as just a normal classroom. So helping children understand their own self-identity, understand the family that they come from, have positive group identities, and as a group, as a person, and your own kind of self-concept of your social ability, and then the start of some awareness or self-awareness as well. So that's kind of the first goal. The second one is diversity. So we are looking for a child that can understand that people are diverse, because we know that children see and recognize diversity. If I was holding a baby, then they could be able, from the 2 or 3 months old, be able to see my hair texture, my skin tone, the shape of my eyes as well. So we know that they recognize differences within humans, but we want them to have generally positive feelings about that kind of diversity as well. We also want to give them accurate language. We're always talking about that. Instead of using your words, we're teaching children by modeling the words and giving them the words to use. And some of those words can be the language for human differences. So we're talking about gender, race, culture, ethnicity, allowing them to know about the differences and have words that are not hurtful to describe those. And then understand that we want to have deep communications and deep connections with other people, and that some of the people that we're going to have relationships with are going to be different than what we recognize in our own families. Justice and activism are in the next 2. Justice, we're going to have children recognize unfairness. I don't think we have to work much on that. Children innately understand unfairness, and they typically know that unfairness hurts. Maybe after 7, it'll get better at understanding that unfairness can hurt other people because of egocentrism and perspective taking. But for the most part, at the very beginning, children know that things are unfair. If you've ever given 2 3-year-olds, if you have 1 Snicker bar and 2 3-year-olds and you break it in half, if it looks at all like it's not fair, they will definitely let you know. That's just part of childhood, is knowing when things are fair. But once again, giving children and modeling for children that language to describe unfairness, and that unfairness can hurt. So that's the one in justice, is we want to give children that language, not just use your words and expect them to be able to understand anti-racism, but for us to model those words for the children so that they can use them. Activism, we want to give children a sense of empowerment and the skills to act as well. So to build off of identity, diversity, and justice, and be able to kind of work against prejudice as well. So these are very, very lofty goals, the anti-bias education goals, and they get very, very, let's say, we have an entire class built around this. So we have 16 to 18 week classes built around these kind of concepts. So if you're interested in any kind of equity or diversity goals, I strongly recommend that you take the Teaching in a Diverse Society class. It's a fantastic class. We love it. We love teaching it, and it's a very important thing. So we're going to build off of those goals right now. I think one of the first things that we can do as directors is to look at our classroom. So what it looks like from the outside and from the inside. So from the outside, what does it look like? Does it look like a place where you might be welcomed, where a lot of, you think, joy and happiness might come from? How it's decorated, the pictures that we have up on the walls, typically we're looking for children's own family pictures to see their own diversity reflected on the walls. And we also want to make sure that the professions and the occupations that we were reflecting as well are quite diverse. And I know Lakeshore has classic kind of pictures of occupations, and they're very diverse, of genders, races, ethnicities, but we can also now find those without going to Lakeshore and spending, half your paycheck. You can also find them online and print them out from Creative Commons as well. But I do really, really love pictures of our own families, because we're very lucky to live in a diverse society. We have lots of cultures in Southern California, so many of our families are going to reflect diversity just naturally, and it makes it more of a home-like environment as well. Pick up and drop off. So ways that we can support during this is the languages that we have posted. If you have English and Spanish speakers, making sure that your signs are both in those languages, or Tagalog or Korean or anything like that as well, not just in one language. I typically would also have people be I would move the sign-in sheet, and I would typically have it on a clipboard or with me, so that parents would come up to me, not all the time, but this way it wasn't just at the door, sign in, here's my kid, run off. But you walk over to me, I'm having family style dining, I can greet you, I can say hello, and welcome you into the classroom, make you feel more like you're in the classroom. The ways that we communicate, we're lucky with technology. We can email, we have the apps as well. We have newsletters, face-to-face as well. So embracing a lot of those varieties can be really, really helpful. When using email though, be mindful of the fact that we could have parents that are low vision or no vision, and making sure and using headers. And if you have pictures, describing what's in the picture for those parents, or even maybe older generations who are caring for children, so that they can kind of use the e-readers, which will read the text to them as well. Support and resources that are offered, making sure that they're nearby, that they're culturally sensitive, that they are going to be a good fit for your program and your program's goals and what your community needs. So I would also say, what are ways, and I would love to hear from you guys, and surprise, surprise, this is your discussion board for this week, is concrete ways that you can build and maintain welcoming classrooms. So I'd love to hear from you guys. If we were wanting to include all different types of families, what are you guys doing right now to support that? Setting up a supportive classroom. I love admin and management. That's why I love teaching these classes. I think handbooks with really, really clear parameters of behavior and conduct are really important. So your mission and diversity statement, which most nonprofits, companies, corporations, school districts have, needs to be explicitly understood for all parents. If you don't have one, if you're a small business or you've just started one, I still think it's important to think about how you want. So a mission statement is just a couple of sentences about your vision of education, and then a diversity mission statement would be something, a paragraph about all of the people that you support, what you think about it personally, and who you're looking to have into your program. So an example would be, if you ran a Christian-based program at a preschool, what is your needs and wants as far as religion? Are you primarily looking for somebody who shares the same faith background, or are you open for other people from other faiths as well? I think with that, it also helps with behavior and conduct as well, that the parents know exactly what they're getting into when they join your program. So are they looking, so is this going to be a very diverse and equity-minded school? Do you have a diversity committee for parents? Is there a certain amount of volunteering that you expect for them? Having all of that from the very beginning can really, really help parents. Same with the mission statement and your philosophy as well. If they're looking for academic and you can't be farther away from academic, that's going to be a mismatch. That's not going to make anybody happy throughout the weeks and months that the child's there. Or on the other flip side, if they really want play-based, but you feel that you're more of like a high scope academic program, that needs to be communicated as well, because we really want to make sure that parents feel like they're supported in the classroom with what they're wishing for their children, and you also are clear about what you are going to provide. I also like to interview or ask families about themselves before and during the enrollment process. We do a lot of this with the child. So when does the child go to sleep? When do they wake up? When do they generally eat? What are some words that they might use? But we might also want to know about the families. Some families might not feel comfortable about this, but some might. Who lives in your house? Who's helping you raise the children? What kind of languages do you speak at home? How can we support you? And it might not be during the enrollment process, it might also be after, when the family feels more comfortable and trusting, but having that kind of information can help you set up that supportive classroom. Mary Murphy, who was the Ooey Gooey lady, if you've ever heard of her, she travels all over the country and she's very into play-based learning. When she ran her own preschool, she would interview all of the families and just kind of try to set up from the very beginning what this program is, who you are, who I am, and what our expectations are. And I think that that might be a really interesting idea that some programs can do and some programs can't. Redo forms is necessary. It's still surprising to me how many forms say mother, father. We have a diverse family structure. We might have one mother, two mothers, one dad, two dads, grandparents. You could be a legal guardian and no parents. You could be a ward of the state. You could be raised by a sibling who's older. So typically we just say guardian. So really making sure that you redo those forms as well, having them in enough languages. And then if you were to give the forms to the parents, that they have the correct kind of information that they need for an e-reader. If any of you have low vision or blind families right now and want some more information on making them compatible, please reach out to me. I know probably a tiny, tiny little bit, but I have been kind of working about that as well. Consider accessibility as well. So how do the parents and grandparents enter into the school, and what could help mobility? So most of our programs are ADA compliant. So that means that they meet the qualifications or the necessary requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal act. So most programs do inside. Some programs don't do outside. So there might be a ledge or a step down to get into the playground. So that might be something that you need to think about. In a lot of programs, we might have a fence around it, which is great for safety, but how easy is it for a family on like maybe leg crutches or in a wheelchair to get into that gate or through that gate? Where is the latch? Is it too high or not? If you have the area at all possible, we had this weird nook one time where I worked, and we made it kind of we brought a couch in, like a small little love seat, and we had like a little table with like the family magazine, the San Diego Family Magazine, and now I think it would be cute to have like a Keurig machine, so you could make a cup of coffee or something like that. So we're just trying to make it super welcoming for families. You could even have like a little lending library. They have those little free libraries that people put in front of their houses. You could put one out in front of your community, or you could do one inside with parenting books. So, as a parent is done with like feeding babies, they could put that in the library and they could take the next one on, feeding toddlers who are picky eaters, something like that. Might be supportive. It might generally make parents feel welcomed in the classroom, and hopefully diverse families feel welcomed as well. Ways that you can communicate. It's so nice. When I first started, it was just a newsletter and face-to-face and conferences. And now it's really, really nice to have email and to have apps. I probably still go a bit old school, especially if there's questions or concerns. I still typically like to give parents a phone call. Most parents don't pick up anymore, but I can leave a nice voicemail. That's probably just how I'm old school. I do think daily greetings are the best and the most universal and the things that we need to be doing with all families, because that face-to-face communication really shows that you care about the child. There are going to be issues where you are going to disagree with families as well. A big one, especially when I worked for the military, was not wanting boys to play in the dramatic play area, the kitchen area, or with dolls. They couldn't pick a pink color, they couldn't use a pink crayon, things like that. So I think it is a process. It's not something that the parents are going to like come over to your side on the very first meeting that you have around gender roles, because our gender roles are ingrained from the moment we're born. So it's not something that you're ever going to be able to have a great solution with on the very first time, but we can kind of listen to them, understand them, feel their perspective and their socialization, the reasons they were raised. We can also offer our perspective, our developmental theory, our educational basis, why gender roles are fluid, why they need to be fluid, especially in early childhood education, because they're learning what gender roles are, and so acting out different ways is very supportive for them. Probably if you knew about this before you had a meeting with the family, you might also want to send them with an easy to read and very accessible kind of writing about maybe gender roles in preschools as well. Typically, we'll have conversations about, we believe that children have that kind of autonomy and control over their choice of play. That's kind of the basics of most early childhood education program. So we don't typically limit a child to playing in any type of rules. We can talk about gender roles and play and support them as well. But we can also understand that not everybody is going to share our beliefs about education, because we've been wildly trained in this field, and parents are coming to us with their own unique perspectives because of how they were socialized. So maybe we can compromise, maybe we can give and take. Maybe it's going to be a lot of different meetings over a lot of different time. Maybe we have to involve our program director or somebody above us as well. And then sometimes there's no compromise. Sometimes, there's disenrollment. That doesn't usually happen that often. But if disagreements, it was just a fundamental philosophy difference, sometimes they will be happier somewhere else, and they'll just naturally do that. And then other times, talking to somebody else up in a chain of command, or getting somebody who's trained in diversity to do a workshop can also really help with those situations, because there's really no easy answers when it comes to those kind of fundamental mismatches that we might have in our worldview or our perspectives. And the biggest thing is just to kind of talk it through and know that it might take a while. So you guys might want to just reflect on a time that you disagreed and then came to a compromise. This might be something personal in your own life with a spouse or a partner, or it could be professionally as well. What does compromise feel like? Does it feel difficult to you? Do you have a lot of emotions associated with it? Maybe you felt that you compromised too much when you were growing up and your voices were not heard, and so compromise feels extra difficult to you. Maybe it's something that you've done a lot of and you feel comfortable with the process of hearing other people. What about times when you couldn't agree? What did you feel then? What happened next? Did it end nicely? Did it end badly? What are your emotions about that? So being able to reflect on our own worldview and how we grew up when it comes to compromise and conflict resolution might really help us be able to work with families and hear their point of view. So on uncomfortable situations with parents, I just want to kind of continue with that. When we have a child who has pre-prejudice, because that's typically what we call it. Children can, especially middle childhood and above, show prejudice, but a lot of times they'll have pre-prejudice, so they're seeing differences, and they might have been hearing things and they don't really know what to do with it, or they've just kind of miscommunicated and maybe not yet used language that we use because they're little and they're curious. So for an example that I can give on that is, asking me, why is your skin so pale? Or, why do you have so many brown spots, freckles on your face or on your arms? And in that situation, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, take a deep breath. And you just are listening, what is the meaning behind the question? So she just wanted to know why her skin color looked different than mine. Sometimes I have to ask the child again to repeat it so I can really get at what are you asking me? And then we can talk about how there's different skin shades, or if they were asking about families, there's different types of families. And if they were older, we could talk about melanin in your skin. And some people have more melanin and some people have less melanin, and what that means, and how I have very pale skin and you have, maybe a beautiful caramel colored skin, and all of our skin colors are totally okay, and they're all beautiful. And then we might want to read a book. There's great books. There's one called Shades of You, I believe, or yeah, I think it's Shades of You, and it's got beautiful realistic pictures of children, so real pictures of children with different types of coloring, and it talks about how the skin is our wrapping, and we all have beautiful like wrapping paper. And then we might want to talk about it with the parents, that they were asking questions, and they might want to reaffirm that the color of their skin at home is really beautiful and they appreciate it as well. What if we kind of get bias, prejudice, racism from a parent, a family member, a guardian, an older child? That's definitely a deep breath situation, because it's going to be probably somewhat upsetting to you that there's bias and prejudice and racism, and we're having to face-to-face combat it. So in those cases, feel free to set a limit. I would say something, if it happened in the classroom, you know, there was a comment that we could classify as prejudice or racism, I would, you know, have a conversation with the parent face to face, sitting down. I'm not going to allow you to speak like that in the classroom. We can set a time for you and me and probably somebody up your chain of command, if you're lucky enough to have them, to talk privately about the comments that you said and the reasons why you said them, so that we can come to some kind of agreement. But you're 100% not going to say comments like that again in front of my staff or in front of the children. And then from there, serious conversations about conduct, about what you allow, what's rude, what do you consider rude or disrespectful, and how people can have viewpoints, but the way that they're going to be expressed, you are going to be in control of setting those limits. As teachers, I don't think that you should necessarily leave this up to your teacher, because the teacher's still going to have to work with that parent's child. And so that's a really difficult situation. And I think as a program director, site supervisor, director, you need to be involved very heavily in this, because you're the one who can actually set the limit that, you know, we have a code of conduct, you signed it, what you said was rude or disrespectful. And then have conversations with others to kind of support you as well as you're kind of going through this. I think that's really, really important, because we want to have diverse programs. We want to welcome all of our families. We want them to be included in our programs. And so doing this kind of work and setting limits and kind of speaking towards prejudice and racism can really take a lot out of you, because it involves a lot of emotions as well. And especially if you identify as a minority or a person of color, this will be even more of kind of a task for you. And so getting support from other people in your community, at home, and also at work is going to be really important. Always have if you have a management chain, I know some people run, you know, smaller programs, but a lot of nonprofits and things kick it up that management chain, especially when it comes to prejudice and racism. You know, a CEO, and maybe not a CEO. I mean, if you worked for the YMCA, you're not going to, you know, call the headquarters, but you might call the person above you, and then they might call the person above that, or they might get guidance from it as well, because you need to be supporting the children and families, and they need to be supporting you as well in how you respond to this. All right. If you're seeing a lot of it within institutions, or it's happening a lot, you need to really describe and observe what is happening in the racism or prejudice or stereotypes, document it, email it to yourself or to other people, because you get those time clocks. So that's a good way to kind of keep track of when things happened, and kind of say that I wrote this on this day. Take a tally or a chart of possible patterns. So on how many days in a month was there maybe a misguided comment from a parent or a staff member or something like that. Talking with supporters and having people who share kind of your beliefs as well. That can really, really help you as far as like management, and if this is kind of a pattern as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about children and parents with special needs right now, because that's another kind of group, is part of diversity, is children with kind of learning differences. So in California, we have about 15% of children have some kind of special need that we might consider like allergies. That would be one, nut allergy. That's probably going to hit your special needs list. Asthma, and that they need a medication maybe. Developmental delays, so they are delayed in one area of development, cognitive, emotional, social. This can be self-help, your ability to take care of yourself. It can be communication. It can be so many areas. And then maybe something like dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum. 3% of California children have a more significant disability. So blind, deaf, mobility issues like they need a wheelchair, cognition and that they're going to be quite cognitively low, or maybe even in self-care as well. And then that's about 3%. So if we were to look at K through 12 students, because that's kind of everybody 0 to 18, if you're looking at K through 12, so kindergarten through 12th grade, about 730,000 students, so 12%. So that's a significant amount receive special education services of some kind, either from a health condition to autism to issues with cognition. So in 2006, I need to find more current information, but we have seen a rise and a continuing rise in people who are receiving services for autism spectrum disorders, which you probably are all aware of. Those are continuing to get diagnosed at a higher rate. And then also learning disabilities has actually decreased, so that's great. So we are meeting the needs of our littlest and youngest learners with early intervention, early start, head starts, all of the work that we do in early childhood education. We're seeing some decreases in cognitive and learning disabilities as those children who are seen as underserved or are at risk are getting the support and services that they and their parents need. A lot of programs I will see does not have, some programs are not inclusive. Some are designed to be inclusive. We have just a Place You Grow, I'm totally blanking on the name, but it's a place in Vista, and they that's kind of what they specialize is in medical care and special education. Lots of programs are specifically trained and very supportive of inclusionary families. Some programs are not, smaller programs, part-day programs, and other programs like that, and I'm not throwing anybody on their bus, but a lot of times it comes from this kind of insecurity. I'm not trained, the child's not going to do well, I'm afraid, the parents are going to be mad at me, I'm going to do something wrong, I'm going to say something wrong, the environment's not set up, and that is, you can't let the fear stop you, because that's a fear-based response, and I don't want your fear to stop you from interacting, welcoming, and supporting children and families with special needs. And I still continue to see this. I had a child, I used to work with children with special needs 0 to 3 for Regional Center here in San Diego. So I would go to their homes and I would help the parents educate their children at home. And they would have communication delays. Maybe they're on the spectrum, Down syndrome, anything like that. So I would work with the child and I would work with the parents. And one time we had a 2-year-old, he had Down syndrome, and mom wanted to get him in just like a Mommy or Me, or maybe like 3 hours a week, you know, like a little preschool program, something like that, maybe 3 times a week just for the morning. And in the neighborhood, she called around, hey, I've got a little one with Down syndrome, and every single time, oh yeah, let's put you on the wait list, I don't have space right now. And she kept kind of calling programs and calling programs. I also knew this neighborhood and I knew that those programs had space in these particular mornings. So I said, you know what, just call and don't say I have a child with Down syndrome, say I have a 2-year-old. And she said, oh, I have a 2-year-old and I'd like to put him in a, you know, twice a week morning program. And all of a sudden there was space available. So that is still continuing to happen. I wouldn't necessarily want to surprise a family, school on the first day. Hey, my child has special needs. But at the same time, that could be seen as discriminatory, and it's also not fair to that family. And I promise you that you can take care of a child. You can't let the fear stop you. Some acronyms that I might be using that I just wanted to clear up is IFSP, which is an Individualized Family Service Plan, which means this is for children under the age of 3 or 36 months. And this is a social worker comes to your house, you have family-based goals, strength-based goals, and it's till you're 3 years old. At 3, you transition to the school district to an IEP, which is an Individualized Education Plan, and this goes from 3 to 21 years old, and this is specific to formal education and your educational goals. My daughter has an IEP for her speech. She has some issues with enunciation and making speech sounds. She can say a lot of words, but she still can't say like her R's our sounds appropriately. So my sister is her Aunt Rachel. So she has a speech IEP, and we go in once a year and we just see how she's doing, and they make new goals. And we've seen some really great process as well. Both processes in both systems, the school district or the Early Start system, are great at helping you identify if your child needs services and then also providing those services as well. Some parents will need to advocate more heavily for their child depending on the special need, but for the most part, it meets the needs of your mild and moderate, and then parents with more severe disabilities are much more kind of in tune with that. Some examples that we might see of an IFSP or an IEP in early childhood education would be a 3-year-old who gets 30 minutes of speech therapy at a public school, but they attend preschool at another location. So maybe once a week, a nanny or a guardian or a parent comes and picks the child up from preschool, maybe at lunchtime, takes them to 30 minutes of speech therapy at their local public school, and then returns them back. An infant with Down syndrome, maybe they're going to get physical therapy where they help with their low muscle tone and their ability to move. They might also get occupational therapy, working on their hands and their ability to feed themselves, to pick up rattles, things like that. So they might get both of those types of therapy at plus 30 hours of care at your traditional infant and toddler program. A 3-year-old with what we consider a global developmental delay, because this means that they have issues in lots of areas of development. So it could be cognitive and physical and communication, or social and emotional, physical and cognitive, something like that, are in a family childcare, and they get in-home therapy. So they get the physical therapist and the occupational therapist come and help, and they are going to start transitioning to a preschool at a school district. So at 3, they're going to go to a special education classroom at a school district, where the therapies are more part of the daily services. And there's a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, and a physical therapist on site to either come to the classroom or pull the child out to work with them. We were looking more at formal education. A 5-year-old in transitional kinder at a public school has spina bifida, and once again, he gets occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy in the classroom and outside of the classroom at the public school district. The bus picks the child up and he delivers them to an after-school program that has been trained in medical and developmental needs. Spina bifida is a hole in your spinal cord, and sometimes there are special medical needs that the staff needs to be aware of, and there might also be developmental needs with walking, being able to ride a bike, that also staff in an after-school program needs to be trained and aware of in supporting them. The easiest thing to do and the most accessible thing for people who are starting their journey into working with children with special needs is to look up and to understand Universal Design for Learning, which we might also abbreviate to UDL. Universal Design for Learning is a way to encompass the diversity of all learners and to accommodate the needs of all learners from the beginning of curriculum design. In other words, instead of developing curriculum and then looking at ways to accommodate diverse learners, according to the principles of UDL, the curriculum is designed with all learners in mind. So there would not be a need to alter the program structures to accommodate the needs of various learners. And this segues really well into Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, where you have spatial and you have your interpersonal, intrapersonal, kinesthetic, all of those types. UDL is kind of an extension of this. So not just seeing that there are many and multiple ways to learn, but that if we are getting to meet everybody from the beginning, then we won't ever really need to change it afterwards. This is a short video that I'm going to play for you guys on UDL and its principles and practices.
In many classrooms, the focus is on the average student. Many curricula are designed for that student. Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anymore. That's why it's in classrooms. Universal design for learning is generally focused on making sure that students
All right, so that was, I was just trying to get some grading done. So that was UGL in a nutshell. There are tons of resources on YouTube where you can show staff or you can learn more about it. And they have lots of resources on Teachers Pay Teachers, on Pinterest. So if you are looking to increase your work with children with special needs, I would definitely start with UDL, which is very accessible. And from there, you can really learn a lot and then just continue to be a better kind of support for families and for children. Some of the things that Cheryl Burgstaller was kind of studying when she was doing her PhD was supporting people with special needs. So with a school climate as well, making sure that you have paperwork and policies that support and welcome all children and families, which I've talked a little bit about, making sure that our words that we use are inclusive as possible, to not, because we want to encourage the single parent, the same-sex parent, maybe even grandparents or our adopted children to feel comfortable when filling out paperwork, and not that mother, father is the only part of a family and that they're outside of the norm or something like that. Communication methods, so how you, the words that you use with somebody, the texts, like the font that you choose is another big one. There are certain fonts that are very dyslexic friendly. So I've been trying to generally move my PowerPoints towards this. It's like Courier, Arial, Verdana, Helvetica. I've been just trying to do everything in those because those are easy for older adults with like vision issues who might wear glasses or something, and people with dyslexia to see better. It helps them not flip letters and words and things like that. Making sure that you train your staff, and having trainings every month is really important, or trainings every once in a while. But consider bringing, when you're having a staff and service day, consider having an anti-bias or part of the day talking about cultural competence as well. Having somebody from Children's Hospital to come in and talk about certain types of special needs to make everybody feel more comfortable. Could be your facilities as well. So the actual like physical environment might also be part of that. So is everything usable for children? I can think of accessible playgrounds in Carlsbad and Mission Bay. So ones where a child with a wheelchair could use the swing, get up on the equipment, where they have Braille for children who are low sight or blind. So it's definitely something that we need in our community. But distance between cots so that a child with maybe crutches can get around and get to the bathroom in nap time, or distance between chairs and tables and furniture. High contrast for very low vision students. So think about infants and how high contrast all of our toys are and our pictures are. We might have to do that for a low vision student. So not having like, this probably would be fairly difficult. While the white on the color is somewhat visible, the shades between this are somewhat similar. We might want to make it more graphic for somebody with low vision to see. Sensory areas where you can just go chill out for a child with autism. How to use the multiple methods that we're kind of talking about, UDL, so multiple intelligences, cultural competence for families, and for children as well. So I'm gonna skip through. Why does this happen? So I just wanted, these are some of the questions that I might ask somebody when I do workshops or training. I might ask people these types of questions to kind of get to your root feelings about diversity and inclusion. So it's called purpose mapping. And so I had asked a question every 30 seconds because it's just kind of like stream of consciousness, like the first thing that pops into your head. If people write a little bit slower, you can give them a minute, but it's not like you're writing an essay. You're just writing like sentences or pictures or something. But I would ask these types of questions about what was your favorite part of school? When I say differing ability, what's the first thing to come to mind? So these are some that I could share with you that you could do to kind of get at people's gut level feelings about inclusion and diversity. And then I typically have people circle things that you wrote to find a theme or a commonality. There's typically something that in most responses, there is a common theme that they might have. So circle them or find them. Why does something stand out to you? Maybe you only mentioned it once and you mentioned other things and you think that's interesting. So that is an example of something that I might do with our staff. So this week, this is the PowerPoint, and you guys will also be doing an assignment and a discussion board as well. Start thinking about the director interview, though. It's not due for a while, but just start generally thinking about a program director, site supervisor, somebody that you would like to interview in the future so that you can go ahead and get that started, and you can get to the location as well, because I know we all live busy lives. You might have to be, taking off an afternoon off work or coming in a little bit late, or maybe allowing them to come in and meet you on a Saturday, something like that. So this is my PowerPoint on diversity and inclusion. I love it, and it's something that most community colleges also have a passion for. So you as a student are going to have a lot of support just built in because you're at a community college, movies, discussions, things like that. So I think the first step in diversity work is knowing yourself, knowing who you work for, and being able to explore those types of ideas. And a community college might feel like a great place to do that. All right, I will see you guys online.